So this happened about 3 months back. It stuck with me and I just want to get the whole story off my chest, to be honest. I live in a rural area in the northwest coast of Scotland. The scenery is beautiful with lochs and bens, lakes and hills for the non-Scots, right outside my door. The nearest village is about a 15-minute drive away and only has a few hundred people itself. Other than that, there are a few other houses sparsely dotted about, but the closest neighbor is still a mile or two away from me. My house is next to the loch, which I'll fish in from time to time, and a large field which acts as my backyard. The field is then abruptly met with a tree line, which is the entrance to one of the largest wooded areas in Scotland. That's more or less the layout of the gaff. Other than that, it's just me living there. My other half passed away a few years ago, and since I fell into a bit of a depression, it was a tough time in my life, but I got through it. Especially after I adopted the wee man, Alfie. Alfie's a border terrier and acts as my best pal. He goes everywhere with me, and has really been the difference between life and death at times. Because we're so isolated up here, the usual routine is just before bed. About 9 or 10 p.m., I'll open the back door for Alfie to run around the field for a bit. Get out any last-minute shites or pisses. It's Scotland, so naturally 360 days of the year are freezing. Because of this, I'll shut the door behind him and wait for him to come and scratch the door after to let him in. So this one night, 25th April this year, things were as norma. I was sat watching some rubbish on Netflix, Alfie next to me. The wee man got up and started stretching, so I made a mental note to go and let him out. I finished watching whatever I was watching and went and opened the back door. The night was, of course, pitch black, and I could just see the outline of the trees in the tree line. I lit up a quick cigarette, bad habit I know, and smoked it quickly before closing the door. I went and did some bits and bobs, closing curtains and doing some dishes, when I heard Alfie scratching away at the door. It had been about 5 or 10 minutes, so I went to go and let him in again. I put the plate I was cleaning down and began walking down the corridor to the back door. I yawned on the way and gave Alfie a rub on the head as I walked past. I thought about having another cigarette, but I gave Alfie a rub on the head. The thought stopped me dead in my tracks. I turned back and sure enough, Alfie was lying snoozing in the corridor. Weird. I could have sworn I heard him scratching on the door. He must not have gone out when I opened the door, and then I imagined the scratching. I turned around again to head back the way I came, and chills ran down my spine. I heard the scratching again. Now I knew for a fact it wasn't Alfie. He was lying right next to me. I also knew for a fact I hadn't imagined it. I waited a few more seconds, and the scratching persisted. I instantly felt my heart drop to my stomach. I felt queasy. What the fuck was scratching at my door? I decided to go upstairs to my bedroom because I knew I could get a view of the back door and what was at it from that window. I cautiously crept up the stairs, and then slowly pulled the curtains back just enough to peek through. I promise on my late Eileen's grave, this next bit is completely true. I watched in horror as a fully grown man who was perched on all fours began to scratch at my back door again. This sight nearly made me faint. I'm not a small man and I chop and deliver firewood for a living, so I'm pretty strong. But just pure creepiness of seeing this shook me to my core. I couldn't see his face that well, but I could make out he was maybe 30-40 years old and was maybe of Western Asian descent with brown skin and a scraggly black beard. A point that may be relevant is that my particular area of Scotland is very white. About 99%, I think, and everyone knows each other anyway. No one even knows someone of that description in any of the local villages within 40 or 50 miles. I also could make out a grin on the man's face. It looked like he was trying to stifle it, however. Like he was excited, but was trying to keep himself composed. The scratch noises were indistinguishable from Alfie's, so I immediately knew he must have had long fingernails. He scratched the door a couple more times over the next minute or so. After this, he crawled down the 3 or 4 stairs back to the back garden and began crawling in circles. This image was even more sickening than the last. A grown man crawling on the floor like a dog. What the actual fuck? That was until he burst out into a sprint. He had quickly risen from his crawl and taken the 10-15 meters he was away as a run-up. A run-up the charge straight into the back door. I fitted those doors myself, so I trusted the hinges they were built on, and rightly so. The man bounced right off the door, but the sound immediately alerted Alfie. Alfie started barking uncontrollably, and I took this as a chance to say something too. "Get the fuck out of here, mate! I can fucking see ya!" I shouted down. The man didn't even flinch. He just stood up from the floor and brushed himself off. He didn't even look up at me. He then just turned around and walked calmly further into the backyard. Further and further until he hit the tree line and still kept walking. The guy had only been wearing a hoodie and dark gray tracksuit bottoms, so he must have been freezing to then venture off into the dark woods alone, so carelessly. The whole situation had me equally as confused as it did terrified. I called the local village's police station. They said they'd sent someone out to talk to me. When the officer got here, I told him the story and recounted the man to the best of my abilities. But after I finished recounting the tale, all I got was a, "Are you drinking again, Derek?" I couldn't believe it. I had had a wee bit of an issue a few years back after Eileen, but put the booze down and been sober for the last 12 months. He clearly just didn't believe me. Fuck, didn't know if I'd believe me either, to be honest. He left and it was just me and Alfie again. Neither of us slept a wink the rest of the night. I also broke my sobriety for the first time that night, which is not something I'm proud of. And that was that. Didn't hear anything about a body in the woods. Didn't hear anything about a man of that description. Didn't hear anything about the same thing happening to the neighbors. I couldn't believe it. The more I went over it in my head, the more it began to terrify me. That man must have been watching me and noticed my habit of letting Alfie in when he scratched the door, for however many nights before he tried it himself. Was just lucky Alf decided not to go out that night. The part that really terrifies me is that he never knew I was watching him. So when he crawled down and kept his acting like a dog act facade going, that was just for him. He was acting like that thinking no one was watching. I've spent the past months combing over all the pictures of any escaped mental patients or convicts over the last 20 years, but nothing. It's almost as if the guy... Fuck, I hear the fucking scratching again. I hear the fucking scratching at my door again, and Alfie is at my feet. It sounds slower this time, and deeper into the wood of the door. I'm gonna go and confront this bastard. Fuck it. Wish me luck, I'll update when it's over.